Hello everybody and welcome to Augmented Reality, where we take a critical look at gaming, technology, and culture, presented by the Triple S League. So this is the premiere episode of our newly rebranded podcast, which we're just taking a bit of a different approach. My name is Asheninity, and as usual, I'm here with Cybsidian.
We still have a lounge, and we still drink NUKA-COLA, but at this point, we're just rebranding the name a little bit because...
Well, we've moved beyond being all about Fallout and Fallout 4. I mean, we still love Fallout. Obviously, it's going to have a special place in our hearts for a very long time.
Occasionally, from time to time, we might change up the lounge that we're sitting in. We might go to a Mass Effect Andromeda bar. We might go to a bar in the Witcher universe. Personally, I can't wait for Cyberpunk 2077, which is due to come out by 2077.
About, eh?
Yeah.
Today we might be sitting at the Vortex, actually, because we're taking an in-depth look at Mass Effect Andromeda from a critical perspective, and by critical I don't mean negative. I just mean we're going to be putting some thought into some of the issues surrounding this game. We're going to be doing
some of it's going to be negative, but not necessarily...
Well, some of it, I just mean by critical, I just mean taking an in-depth look at it, and we'll be doing a general review as well as looking at some of the other issues surrounding this game that have been all over the internet, all over the news. Let's get down to it. Mass Effect Andromeda, long-anticipated game for a very popular game series that has not only really pushed the boundaries of gaming and storytelling and what is possible in games, but has also sort of pushed the boundaries on social issues throughout the past decade or so that the series has been in the limelight. When did the first Mass Effect come out?
2007.
So 10 years.
Yeah.
I remember when my friend told me, yeah, this game's coming out and it's going to be absolutely massive and you can go to all these planets. And at first I was like, yeah, what? How is that even possible? The first Mass Effect was a massive, massive game. Very massive and very immersive. And that's the first thing I'll say in my review of the new title, Andromeda.
It is definitely massive.
It is definitely massive, but not just open world, big empty space massive. I think a better word that I would use is immersive. I really enjoyed Andromeda a lot more than I was expecting to. And I think a lot of the reason for that is that the world just sucked me right in, right off the bat. I was in there. You're in this adventure in a new galaxy. This huge group of humans and other aliens have come from the Milky Way to Andromeda to really push the frontiers of exploration. And it's really sort of a survival frontiersman type of scenario. You know, like the first people crossing the Atlantic Ocean to the New World, if it will. Obviously not the first people, but like the first Europeans, kind of coming to North America. It's like that, but on a much, much, much grander scale.
It's about colonization and stuff like that. And they honestly, I mean, they were forced into this by the ending in Mass Effect 3, which we won't spoil, for a game that's several years old and that everybody complained about when they saw the ending. So, basically, they were kind of put into a corner, and they couldn't really do very much with the existing universe without upsetting probably a lot of people. So there were some major issues to be handled, and essentially the best way to handle it was, and which also made the most sense kind of logically from a story point of view, is like, hey, why don't we just move to another galaxy? Because with the Reaper threat coming, it would make sense for people to kind of send out an arc to preserve what was...
In case we get obliterated. This is actually a real world issue that some people are thinking about. Like what if a meteorite comes along at the wrong time or something happens that could just wipe out our planet? And how can we preserve humanity? And so that's actually pushing...
Going to Mars, not actually that helpful because no magnetic core. So kind of
it'd be a struggle to survive.
The planet's kind of dead and doomed to stay that way unless you can do something about the atmosphere and a whole bunch of other radiation stuff.
Tons of things. Obviously not a simple problem. I mean, it's hard enough to just get people to another planet.
I think one of our next best options is probably Titan, but again, it's like you're gonna have to master living under water that's underneath an ice sheet in order to survive. and again, that's something that we haven't exactly been striving to produce. So anyways, real world issues aside, this is a massive game. There are some major issues with this game. I would put it as a buy, but if the game had been just a little bit worse and had a little bit more bugs, I would not have put it as buy.
That is one of the issues that I have with it. And I just wanted to start this off by saying I really, really enjoy Mass Effect Andromeda. Like I've been playing it constantly. I love the game.
I finished pushing through the whole story, and I've been playing a lot of multiplayer. And the multiplayer is the real reason why I got it. I seen the multiplayer a while ago, and I knew it was going to be good. And I mean, the modes, I really hope that they incorporate new kinds of modes. I'm not a super huge fan of just the generalized survivor kind of thing. I would really like to see some different game styles and play styles and doing some stuff that's a little bit more interesting than other than kind of the exact same thing that I was in playing in number 3. But at the same time, just the mobility and the fun of the multiplayer it still holds up really, really well. There's some minor issues with it, but I've been missing that multiplayer kind of like feel from Mass Effect 3 for quite a while. The abilities are great. I can't think of any other game that has a Vanguard style of play, which I absolutely love. So that's huge on my list. I love the Vanguard play, and I don't get that in any other shooter. I've never been able to kind of have that experience where you go from one side of the map literally to the other side of the map into a giant mob or pack of enemies, light them all up, cause a massive explosion, and then beam off to the next. That's an experience that is a hell of a lot of fun, but you don't have that in almost any other. I can't even think of another shooter. If there's another shooter that has that mechanic, please let me know, because I'd be interested in playing it.
I'm loving the single player campaign. I find the gameplay to be an incredible amount of fun. The planets you explore are really big, but they're not too big. They're not tedious to explore. Mm-hmm. I've found that, and they're very different from one another, which is something that in the original Mass Effect, and I skipped 2 and 3. I have not played those, but in the original Mass Effect, after a while, all of the planets started to feel the same, just textured differently. This one, not so much. Like, you have some of them that are just massive wide open spaces. You have others that are small enclosed areas where you can't see anything because of all the foliage and underbrush. And I appreciate the diversity of the characters and the acting. I have been impressed with the voice acting, and it takes a lot to impress me as far as voice acting. Mm-hmm. I'm very critical when it comes to voice acting.
The voice acting in this has been just on the spot. Just perfect. It was done marvelously well. Every character I met, every Krogan I talked to sounded like a Krogan. Every Solarian sounded like a Solarian. Every Asari, with the exception of Phoebe, sounded like an Asari.
That's one thing I noticed, though. The Solarian females, they just sound like normal human females. The male Solarians, they have this quality to their voice that's alien, and it that just didn't carry over to the females for some reason. Just a small thing that I picked up that I was like, that just doesn't seem to fit right. But overall, very impressed with the voice acting.
Story-wise, we're not going to do any major spoilers. Only like they went to Andromeda. There's this thing called the Nexus. There's these things called arcs. That's pretty much.
I think stuff that's in the trailers is fair game.
Yeah, it's pretty much fair game for that stuff. So the story is pretty solid. Like I said, they were kind of in a bit of a box. There are a few things that don't make sense logistically, but from a narrative point, they were kind of forced to make some of these kind of hard choices. And then one of the things that kind of dropped was, the big deal with the Pathfinders. They make such a big deal about the Pathfinders, and they don't really go into a really detailed explanation as to why they're so important. Unless you have a really firm understanding of like colonial America in like the early days of settlement, you don't necessarily understand why they're so important. And then technically in the Andromeda universe, they don't really emphasize enough as to why the Pathfinder team can do things that the regular teams can't. And you show up and they're like, we've been waiting for a Pathfinder forever, and it's like, well, there's a couple things wrong with that. First of all, I don't understand why the Nexus didn't have their own Pathfinder. That, to me, does not make sense. All of the arcs do, except for the most important thing to the mission, which is the Nexus.
Each arc has its own Pathfinder because the Pathfinder's job is to find a place for their people to settle.
Yeah.
That's their job. Now, they don't go into much detail about the kind of training that the Pathfinder has.
And the technology. It kind of it made me feel like I was playing Halo, like 1 and 2 and 3 all over again, because it's like you have an edge that nobody else, on the Nexus has. And they don't really make it very clear, so they don't really make that too concise. So that's the only kind of drop off in the story that's kind of problematic. Other than that, they stick to a lot of the general tropes. They kind of demonize the Krogan a little bit, and then they demonize everybody else for demonizing the Krogan, which is a little bit of an old story, but you can play the game in which that kind of removes that as an issue. Mm-hmm. And one of the main companions characters that you play with, Drac, there's a lot of stuff that's directly tied to him, and if you want to remove that as an issue, you can. And I did appreciate that. I did this for 3 games. I really want it to be done with. So that's kind of the only issue that I had with the story. So between the story, the dialogue, and the acting, I was really happy with it. I hated PB, but that's a personal choice. She reminded me of people that I've met in the past that are super flaky. They have like 0 level of commitment, and they have no interest in kind of seeing things from your vantage point. It's all about them. And I have, frankly, no desire to to play with a companion character like that. She's great in combat, and I did end up bringing her to a lot of stuff because she did, constantly help me set up for big explosions. But in all honesty, I do not like that character. But I really loved the Drac character. He's probably the funniest character to take with you on pretty much everything. His dialogue is just killer. Liam is a joke machine, and
Liam just needs to keep his freaking shirt on. There was times that I felt like Steve Carell in Date Night, yelling at Mark Wahlberg, "Would you wear a freaking shirt?"
It's really funny. So there's lots of great characters.
Lots of great characters, lots of great humor. Some of the dialogue you hear just walking around in various places is so funny. Mm-hmm. They did a really good job of the writing and the story and the characters in general. So we've both enjoyed it quite a lot. Can't give it a 10 out of 10.
No,
just for a few reasons.
And let's talk about them now. So
yeah.
The biggest elephant in the room is the animations. And from what I expect from a AAA studio, from what I expect from BioWare, we have to give them a 2 out of 10. And there's a couple reasons for this. First of all,
speaking just about the animations.
Yeah.
Though, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, just
to clarify,
as far as
not like the overall review.
Yeah, just as far as like the animations goes, it was not what a professional studio should have put out. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one is that it wasn't actually an issue with the animation. And I didn't get the whole story until just recently, and I had to do some confirmation. And so there's not an issue with the animations at all. What you see when you have the characters you're talking to them and suddenly their head twists around, or the bodies start floating in the air, that is a problem between the programming, between the animation code and what the engine is running. If you are a fan of Skyrim and have done modding in Skyrim, you understand that when you put in new animations into the game via mods, you have to run this program called Finis. It takes the new animation code and tells the engine what to do with it. Now, all games use this type of system where there's a translation between the animations, which can be good or bad. We can make that distinction. There's bad animations from a bad animator, and then there's good animations from a good animator, but both of them can look equally as terrible by an improper code translation between the animation mechanics and the core game code. And so there were a lot of issues that you might be really familiar with that you've seen in other games. Think back to Fallout New Vegas. When it released, they had there was a scene where you're talking to the doc before you leave, spoiler for the first 2 minutes of Fallout New Vegas, where if you don't run the patch, if you use day one patching system, sometimes what can happen is while he's talking to you, his body will just float and do a 360 in the air while he's talking nice and slow to you. It's really creepy. It's the creepiest thing. But that happens in Mass Effect from time to time on, again, the pre-day one patch, which is what a lot of journalists used to showcase the issues. That problem is not an animation problem. That is a programming code problem. And in a big studio that makes AAA games, those are two different people, period. Those are not the same people.
And it could be two different studios entirely.
Two different departments within the studio for sure. And so there was, at some point, somebody dropped the ball on doing something. There's literally 100 different things that could have gone wrong here. And for a professional studio, this is really unacceptable, considering that, and we do need to make this clear, this was BioWare Montreal, which is a brand new studio, which has not made a game previous. A lot of these people are fairly green, but at the same point, they had people at BioWare Austin and BioWare Edmonton who have recently put out expansions and DLC that have amazing facial animations that use, in one case, use the identical engine. So there's no reason why, when somebody was having some issues, why they couldn't have called up somebody else in the company, even if it was at a different studio, and said, look, we're sorry to do this, but we need you to come out for a couple of weeks to put us straight, because we screwed something up. The launch is coming, and we don't know how to fix it. So
right.
A lot of people are wanting to blame EA. A lot of people wanting to blame just BioWare. This is a problem all around. When you have a publisher pushing for a product to be launched on a certain deadline, and they don't care about polish quality, they just care about getting it out so that they can, get you working on more DLC, so that they can increase their bottom line. That's an issue. When you have a studio that's green and that doesn't know how to kind of communicate to their superiors and to their veterans in the same company to ask for help, that's also the problem. So a lot of these problems together caused the issues that you have with the animations. The other thing that we need to point out, which has been a problem in many other studios, there's another problem that happened here that BioWare Montreal has fallen to, and that is their play testers, their QA testers. Now, more and more companies and more publishers like EA, like Activision, are pushing their play testing onto their clients, onto their consumers, via like early access and pre-orders and all this kind of betas and the alpha access, which in a lot of cases are just hurting them, because what they get is these generalized, it's kind of a two-edged sword. It can kind of cause issues both ways. But one of the issues that it causes to the studio directly is that they get kind of a bit of an echo chamber going on when they selectively pick the reviews that they want to listen to. So that's a bit of a problem. That's a bit of a major issue. But what happens when you do that is you also don't have a high enough demand and a high enough level of expertise that you're asking for your QA testers. And in some cases, your QA testers are now even more at the bottom of the barrel, which means that their opinions are even more disregarded. And they're also, again, they're paid, typically they're paid minimum wage, or even if that. And in some cases with new studios, what you have is you have a lot of friends and family of employees who will go in for the game testing, and they'll do it for basically nothing, just to be able to kind of get their name on it, or to kind of maybe get a foot in the door of the company. And both of these things are bad, because they're there to make the developers and the team leads happy. They're not going to walk up to the team lead and say, hey, you have a shitty product and there's a big issue here and you need to fix this. If you say that to some people in the industry, you will no longer have a job as a QA tester. And this is becoming more and more of an issue in today's world.
That sure defeats the purpose of...
Not to say that this is a rampant issue, but this is an issue, especially with new studios. And it needs some major self-correcting here right away.
Well, and a lot of the problem, though, is that you have these overarching corporations that are putting their label, their name on the product, and they're, setting the deadlines and they're pushing for what they want. They're not the people who are actually making the game or playing the game. And this just creates problems. I mean, it has benefits too. Obviously, they have the money behind them to make a big budget AAA project and things like that. They can get the advertising out there so it sells well. But they're a stakeholder in the project, so they have opinions about how the game should be, and that can be difficult. I've encountered that in situations I've worked in before, not in game development, but in other kinds of technical development. You've got a lot of people to please.
Mm-hmm. I really should point this out too, because one of the games that I worked on, you can never please everybody. And one of the devs that I've worked with in the past directly, he tried to please every critical response that came in from his tester base, and he has extended his development time by like 300% in trying to do what everybody was telling him to do from all of the different departments, from all of the other stuff that was going on. He tried to do and fix everything, which it basically put a game that should have come out in 3 years to coming out in, well, it's still not out yet.
Right.
So.
Andromeda, though, it needed a longer testing cycle.
Yeah.
It is got a
probably
lot.
Probably about 6 months, I'd say.
At least. Yeah, I'd say about another 6 months would have done it, just because it has, like I said, really enjoying the game, but it's missing this final level of polish that you would expect from a title like this. There are just some silly little glitches, just silly things that are happening. Parts of the mechanics and gameplay that are just not quite there. It's and I would have overhauled the crafting system completely. I think
the crafting system is
crafting system drives me nuts. It's tedious. It's boring.
For me, it's acceptable. The inventory management system and all of that put together, it does feel like it wasn't really super fleshed out.
Just something stupid like you have to go to a loadout station to change which items you have equipped. And you can't, like if you're at a merchant and you're like, I don't really like that rifle I'm using. I want to sell it, buy something else. You can't sell it. It doesn't show up in your inventory if you have it equipped. You have to go to the loadout station, unequip it, and then go back to the merchant in order to sell it. Little things like that just are irritating.
It could have been done a little bit better, and also with the especially as far as the armor goes. There's some great armors in the game, but I kind of would have thought that they would have done more. But at the same time, we've got all the DLC to come out, which and I have to be really honest here, they're gonna have to wow my pants off with this DLC. I did not buy Mass Effect 3's DLC because of the way that game ended, and I was like, well, I am not, on principle, I'm not buying any of the DLC when it comes out. I bought it when it came out, when it was packaged all together I got it for like $5.
Right.
That's when, but that was years later. Yeah. Like I just did some of that DLC, and frankly, I really need to be impressed by them in order to buy the DLC for Andromeda. I'm excited for it because they set up a lot of really cool stuff, and I really hope that they pull it off really well. I hope they come out with a massive patch that fixes a lot of the animation issues that's totally doable, because again, it's not an animation core issue. It's just a programming translational issue between key, portions of the game.
And there's a lot of the little things I mentioned earlier that could be fixed with a big sort of blanket patch.
Yeah.
The one other thing I'll say in criticism of the game is that the tutorials are very poorly implemented. I do appreciate in one sense that they sort of build the tutorials into the game missions, but there were a lot of times where it's like, what am I doing? And a lot of people have said they don't appreciate how the tutorials were implemented. So overall, my rating, I would give it a 7 out of 10. Right now, I'd say buy on sale. With some improvements, some patches, some fixes, which we'll see how it goes over the next few months, I would easily bump that up to an 8 or an 8.5. Yeah.
So my release rating is definitely a 5 out of 10. It's only half of what I was hoping for.
Okay, fair enough.
in respect to it as an entire package. Now, if they come out with a great patch and some great DLC, this can easily become one of my favorite games of 2017. And I know I'll probably end up coming back to this title again and again and again and again, because it's huge, it's massive, and there's lots to do. And just due to the fact of the competition, there's not much else to play and to like. So it is being played a lot and probably will be played a lot throughout the year. But at the same time, I really wanted them to do a lot better with this title.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton when you do that. Check out this video. It's one of our favorite things that we've done so far on our channel. And here's some more stuff you might like. See the description below for links to our mods on Nexus Mods.